There's a quiet kind of person in this world, the kind you don't often hear about because they rarely announce themselves. They aren't the loud ones in crowded rooms, or the people always moving from one gathering to another. They're the ones who feel most alive in silence, who breathe easier within the walls they know, who don't need the chaos of the world to feel connected to it. They're the ones who love staying home, not out of avoidance, not out of loneliness, but out of a deep psychological alignment with who they are. And yet, society rarely understands them. We live in a world that applauds extroversion, movement, noise, and constant participation. You're expected to go out, show up, be seen, be social. So when someone chooses the quiet path instead, the world rushes to call it isolation. But it isn't always isolation. Sometimes it's harmony. For people who love staying home, home isn't just a place. It's a nervous system. It's safety translated into walls, silence translated into breathing space. It's a territory where their thoughts can stretch without interruption, where their emotions aren't rushed, where they don't have to perform versions of themselves to fit into expectations that feel too tight. Most people don't realize it, but the desire to stay home is often rooted in biology. Human beings don't all process stimulation the same way. Some minds crave novelty, noise, crowds, sensory overload. Others collapse under it. For the ones who love staying home, the outside world can feel like a constant hum, a current too strong to swim against. Their brains register every sound, every expression, every shift in energy, not because they're fragile, but because they're perceptive, deep feelers, observers, thinkers. Psychologists call this high sensitivity an innate trait, found in about 15–20% of people. Their nervous systems react more intensely to external input. A crowded street, a loud restaurant, too many voices overlapping, these things don't just feel overwhelming. They feel draining in a way that others can't see. So home becomes not an escape, but a reset button, a place where their senses can breathe, where their mind can settle, where they can exist without the weight of constant stimulation pressing against their thoughts. There's also something else happening beneath the surface: emotional bandwidth. Social environments require emotional output, reading body language, maintaining conversations, managing impressions, staying on, even when the mind feels off. For some people, this effort costs a lot. The energy they spend interacting with the world takes longer to replenish. Not because they're antisocial, but because they're wired for depth rather than breadth. They don't crave many interactions, they crave meaningful ones, and meaningful moments rarely happen in crowded rooms. They happen in safe spaces, quiet corners, slow conversations, small circles, and home becomes the container for those moments. But staying home isn't just about conserving energy, it's also about reclaiming control. The world is unpredictable. People are unpredictable. Plans shift, emotions clash, environments change without warning. But home is a place where everything makes sense. The way the light falls, the rhythm of familiar noises, the objects positioned exactly where they belong, the sense of ownership in every corner. This stability isn't laziness, it's regulation. A way of comforting the mind so that it can function without constantly bracing for the next unexpected demand. There's a psychological concept known as the comfort zone, often portrayed as something limiting, something to break out of. But comfort zones exist for a reason. They are the emotional environments where the mind feels safe enough to repair itself. Some people need more time in them than others. For those who love staying home, their comfort zone isn't a cage, it's a sanctuary. They don't stay there because they fear the world. They stay because the world moves in a rhythm that isn't theirs. And rather than force themselves into a rhythm that feels unnatural, they choose to honor their own. Yet, society tries to shrink this preference into labels: boring, antisocial, unambitious. But these labels miss the truth. Many homebodies are deeply creative. Their minds flourish in solitude because solitude creates space. It removes the noise that clouds their imagination. It allows ideas to unfold slowly, like petals in warm light. Some of the world's most profound thinkers, artists, and innovators preferred quiet rooms over crowded halls. Not because they lacked social skills, but because their internal world was richer than any external stimulation could offer. And then there's another layer: emotional safety. The outside world comes with expectations, judgments, comparisons, subtle pressures to be more, do more, show more. But at home, people can just be. Their true selves come forward because they are not performing. They are not negotiating identity. They are not adjusting themselves to match the environment. Their emotions can flow without the fear of being misread. Their thoughts can breathe without interruption. Home becomes the place where their authenticity feels most welcome. There's also the matter of trust. Homebodies often form deep attachments to the environments that have never failed them. Some people have histories where the outside world was unkind, unpredictable, or overwhelming. Home became their anchor during those moments. Their nervous system learned to associate walls with safety, silence with relief, routine with stability. These associations don't disappear easily. They become encoded in memory, in habits, in the body. So staying home isn't just a preference, it's an imprint, a response shaped by both comfort and survival. Still, the psychology of loving home is not rooted only in protection, it's rooted in connection. The connection to oneself, to personal rituals, to small joys that don't require an audience, to routines that feel grounding, to hobbies that flourish in uninterrupted time. There's something deeply nurturing about being in a space that responds to your needs without negotiation. And yet, even with all these truths, people who love staying home often feel misunderstood. They're told to get out more, be social, live life, as if life doesn't happen in quiet rooms, as if joy requires noise, as if meaning only forms in crowded places. But the homebody heart knows better. They know that fulfillment can come from peaceful mornings, warm blankets, familiar books, simple meals, soft music, deep thoughts, long stretches of time spent in reflection rather than rush. They know that life can be lived deeply even when it's lived quietly. There's one more psychological aspect often overlooked: internal reward. Some people's brains are wired to find pleasure in external stimulation, applause, social engagement, new experiences. Others are wired to find reward in internal experiences, ideas, sensations, quiet pleasure, safety, stillness. Their dopamine system responds differently. Their joy is not fueled by novelty but by comfort, not by crowds but by calm, not by movement but by meaning. People who love staying home are not running from life. They're running toward a version of life that aligns with their nervous system, their identity, and their emotional rhythm. And that rhythm is slower, softer, deeper. It beats quietly, but it beats honestly. And for them, that honesty is worth more than any social expectation they're told to meet. But there's another side to loving home that goes even deeper, one that isn't immediately visible even to the people who live it. It's the psychological need for coherence. In a world that constantly pulls attention in 100 different directions, homebodies tend to crave environments where everything makes sense, where emotions are predictable, routines are stable, and the mind doesn't have to armor itself. Outside, everything changes. Moods shift, conversations twist unexpectedly, social dynamics fluctuate, environments overwhelm the senses. Inside, the inner world feels organized. They know where everything is. They know how the light hits their favorite corner at a certain hour. They know which sounds comfort them and which ones don't exist at all. They know the feeling of their own space, and that familiarity becomes a language their nervous system trusts. Psychologically, this connection to familiarity is tied to something known as cognitive fluency. the mind's preference for what's easy to process. New places require effort, new interactions require mental adjustments, new environments demand social positioning, but familiar spaces, they allow the brain to shift out of analysis mode and into presence. That's why homebodies often think more clearly when they're in their own space. Their mind isn't wasting energy scanning for danger or decoding social cues. It's free to wander, reflect, create, or simply rest. The comfort of home reduces cognitive load, opening space for deeper thinking and emotional clarity. There's also a profound psychological safety that comes from being in an environment where nothing is expected of you. Outside, people carry invisible scripts. How to act, what to say, what tone to use, how to present themselves. Every social interaction is a performance in subtle ways, even when it's unintentional. But at home, there is no script. No one evaluating your tone or your timing, no one analyzing your pauses or your silences. You're allowed to simply be. And for people who feel deeply, who think deeply, who process everything at greater intensity, that freedom is not a luxury, it's a lifeline. People who love staying home often have rich inner worlds. Their imagination is active, their thoughts intricate, their emotional landscape full. Home gives them the environment they need to explore that inner world without the pressure of external noise interrupting the process. Some of them create art, some write, some think, some simply breathe. But whether or not their inner world produces something tangible, the silence and solitude they seek are not empty, they're full of meaning, full of ideas, full of sensations and insights that would never arise in the rush of outside life. But this love for home doesn't always come from peace. Sometimes it comes from wounds. Humans tend to retreat toward what once protected them. If someone grew up in an environment where the outside world felt unsafe emotionally, socially, or physically, their adult brain may associate home with survival. Their nervous system may still carry traces of old fear, old uncertainty, old experiences that taught them it's safer inside. So home becomes not just comfort, but a shield, not just relaxation, but retreat. And while time softens these wounds, the attachment to home remains, because the body remembers safety before the mind does. This doesn't mean homebodies are damaged or broken. It means they learned early how to self-soothe, how to regulate themselves, how to find sanctuary within their own space. That skill, self-regulation, is something many people spend adulthood trying to learn. The person who loves staying home has simply mastered it naturally. They know how to calm themselves, how to find peace in stillness, how to create their own sense of belonging without relying on the world to supply it. Their ability to be alone without feeling lonely is a strength, not a weakness. But society doesn't always celebrate this strength. The world praises busyness as if stillness were failure. It glorifies constant motion as if rest were laziness. It romanticizes crowds and gatherings as if solitude were a deficiency instead of a preference. So homebodies often grow up hearing messages that make them question themselves. Why don't you go out more? Why don't you meet new people? Why are you always indoors? These questions imply that being home is a problem to fix, but it isn't. It's a preference to understand, a rhythm to honor, a psychological truth to respect. There's a kind of peace that comes from being in your own space that people who thrive outside may never fully grasp. It's the peace of knowing you don't have to explain yourself. The peace of being surrounded by things that hold your memories. The peace of silence that doesn't feel empty, but alive. The peace of being able to hear your own thoughts clearly. For homebodies, these experiences are not secondary, they are essential. And then there's energy management. Some people gain energy from social interaction, others lose it. It's not about introversion versus extroversion. That's too simple. It's about how your emotional battery recharges. For some, connection recharges. For others, solitude does. neither is superior. They're simply different energy systems. Homebodies tend to fall into the category of people whose battery fills in calm environments. They don't need crowds to feel alive. They don't need constant stimulation to feel engaged. Their sense of aliveness comes from inner harmony, not external excitement. There's also something called parasympathetic activation, the state your nervous system enters when you feel safe. Your heart rate slows. Your breathing deepens. Your muscles relax. Your mind steadies. For home-loving individuals, this state is most easily activated at home. Their body naturally shifts into healing mode. That's why the outside world, while enjoyable in small doses, can feel exhausting. Their nervous system spends that time in a state of alertness, taking in every detail, processing every sound, interpreting every face. Home is where that alertness finally dissolves. Another psychological layer is control, not in the unhealthy sense, but in the stabilizing sense. At home, you control your environment. You decide the noise level, the temperature, the lighting, the pace of your day. Outside, everything is uncertain, plans change. People shift moods. Unexpected situations arise. For someone with a sensitive nervous system or a deep emotional nature, too much unpredictability can feel overwhelming. Home provides predictability, not in a restrictive way, but in a grounding way. Predictability gives their mind room to breathe. And yet, loving home isn't about rejecting the world. It's about integrating it on their own terms. People who love staying home usually still enjoy connection. They just prefer it in controlled doses. A quiet coffee shop instead of a crowded party. A walk with one close friend instead of a room full of strangers. Intimacy instead of interaction. Depth instead of noise. They don't avoid people. They avoid environments that drown their inner voice. One of the most misunderstood aspects of homebodies is their capacity for joy. Their joy is subtle, but deep. It comes from morning light on the floorboards, from the comfort of familiar blankets, from the simple pleasure of brewing tea, from the quiet hum of a night spent in reflection, from the rhythm of routines that feel like rituals. These small joys are not lesser than the big ones celebrated by others. In fact, they are often more sustainable, more grounding, more authentic. And perhaps the most important psychological truth is this: people who love staying home are not afraid of solitude, they're fluent in it. They understand that solitude is not silence, it is conversation with oneself. It is listening to the body, listening to the mind, listening to the emotions that get drowned out in louder environments. It is where they meet themselves without interruption. And that meeting, repeated over time, creates a depth of self-understanding that many people spend a lifetime seeking in the outside world. And as you go deeper into understanding the people who love staying home, something else becomes clear. Their connection to home is not just a preference, it's a form of emotional intelligence. While the world often pushes a narrative that happiness must be loud and visible, homebodies understand a quieter truth. Fulfillment is internal. It is built in small moments, in safe feelings, in the inner gentleness that arises when life finally stops demanding and simply allows. People who love being home have learned how to create that gentleness for themselves. They know how to shape an environment that supports their mental health instead of draining it, how to build a sanctuary where their heart has room to breathe. They know how to honor their own emotional rhythm instead of feeling pressured to match a pace that never belonged to them. As they spend more time in their own space, they begin to discover parts of themselves that others might miss. Their creativity often blooms when the world is quiet. Their insights deepen when they are alone with their thoughts. Their intuition sharpens in the stillness. They don't rush through their emotions but allow them to unfold naturally. They learn to sit with feelings rather than escape them. They learn to rest without guilt. They learn to listen to the soft messages their mind gives when the background noise fades. For them, home is not a limitation, it's an amplifier, a place that allows them to expand rather than shrink. And perhaps the most misunderstood truth about these individuals is that they often love people deeply. They simply love them differently. Their love is not expressed in crowded rooms or constant interaction. It's expressed in presence, in depth, in attention. Homebodies can be some of the most emotionally generous individuals, but their generosity flows best in spaces where they feel grounded. They may not thrive in chaos, but they thrive in connection that feels intentional, safe, meaningful. And the people who understand them, the ones who truly see them, realize that their quiet nature isn't distance, it's depth, it's sincerity, it's presence without performance. There's also a psychological strength that comes from being able to enjoy one's own company. Many people fear being alone not because they dislike the quiet, but because they fear meeting themselves in it. Silence can be confronting. Solitude can be revealing. Homebodies have already made peace with that. They've learned to befriend their own thoughts, to trust their internal world, to find stability in their inner dialogue. They don't run from themselves, they return to themselves, and that self-return is a skill many never master. On a deeper psychological level, people who love staying home often carry a refined sense of boundaries. They know what environments drain them. They know what conversations exhaust them. They know which people disrupt their inner harmony. Their preference for home becomes a way of protecting their emotional energy, not avoiding life, but choosing life in a way that keeps them whole. They understand their limits not as flaws, but as guideposts. And rather than push themselves to the point of burnout, they honor those limits with quiet confidence. This kind of self-preservation isn't selfish, it's wisdom earned through awareness. But loving home doesn't mean shutting the world out permanently. It means choosing how to engage with the world. When homebodies step outside, they often do so with intention. They are more selective about where they go and who they spend time with. They value genuine moments over social obligations. They prefer depth over quantity. They look for the kinds of environments that allow them to be themselves, not the environments that expect them to perform. And when they find those moments, those people, those places, they show up fully, wholly, authentically. They may not go everywhere, but where they go meaningfully. There's also a calm kind of joy that fills the life of someone who loves staying home. They find beauty in slow mornings, in quiet afternoons, in peaceful nights. They find meaning in the routines they build, lighting a candle, making tea, reading a book, tending to their space, creating small rituals that make life feel soft. These are not insignificant habits. They are grounding rituals that regulate the mind, that give shape to the day, that provide the nervous system with a sense of predictability and safety. In a world that often demands constant novelty, homebodies find richness in repetition, the familiar, the stable, the known. And something profound happens when a person begins to honor that preference without shame. They stop feeling guilty for choosing peace. They stop apologizing for needing rest. They stop comparing their rhythm to the rhythm of people who thrive in noise. They begin to understand that a life lived deeply is not always a life lived publicly. That joy doesn't need an audience. That connection doesn't need a crowd. That growth doesn't need a stage. They begin to see that their quiet life is not small, it's spacious. As time passes, people who love staying home often become more attuned to the emotional subtleties that others overlook. They notice how their body reacts to certain environments. They sense when their energy begins to drain. They become experts at identifying emotional overstimulation before it overwhelms them. This awareness doesn't just help them protect their mental health, it helps them build a life aligned with their nervous system. They choose friends who feel easy to be around. They choose environments where they can breathe. They choose routines that support their well-being. They make their life a reflection of their psychological needs, instead of bending themselves to fit a world that moves too fast. And this alignment produces a rare kind of peace, one that isn't dependent on circumstances. They don't need the perfect job, or the perfect relationship, or the perfect social circle to feel grounded. Their peace flows from within, from the inner stability they cultivate in the quiet, from the rituals they honor, from the emotional sanctuary they build inside themselves as naturally as they build it inside their home. They learn that comfort is not complacency. Stillness is not stagnation. Solitude is not loneliness. These are simply different forms of living, forms that suit their temperament, their mind, their heart. Eventually, the world begins to feel less like something to escape and more like something to approach gently, selectively, intentionally. They step out when they choose, and they step back when they need to. They engage when it feels right, and they retreat when it feels heavy. They don't push themselves into emotional debt just to meet expectations that were never theirs. And little by little, they become the authors of their own rhythm. And maybe that's the real psychology behind loving home. It's not about the four walls or the space itself. It's about the freedom to be honest with yourself. The freedom to create a life that feels safe and nourishing. The freedom to move at your own pace. The freedom to protect your energy. The freedom to choose depth over noise, intention over obligation, presence over performance. People who love staying home have discovered a truth that many spend their whole lives chasing. That peace is something you create, not something you wait for. It's not found in crowded rooms, but in aligned ones. Not in constant motion, but in intentional movement. Not in being everywhere, but in being fully where your heart feels safe. And when you understand this, you stop seeing them as withdrawn or antisocial. You start seeing them as people who have learned the art of protecting their inner world. People who have mastered the balance between solitude and connection. People who have found wholeness in quiet, meaning in simplicity, and strength in stillness. Because loving home is not about hiding from life. It's about living in a way that makes life feel gentle, honest, and true. And there is nothing small about that.